we are going to be looking at width, height, and positioning elements. Our first step is to go ahead and create a folder called CSS Practice. Then we're going to open up Dreamweaver, and I'm going to add a new, and we're going to call it width, so we'll just leave our title at width as well. Say creates, and I'm going to do a file save as. Make sure that you find the folder that you had, and we're going to say width. Note, I do not need to say .html. The reasoning is because we have a save as type and it will add the extension on for me. The next thing it says is I need to create 4 different divs. So I'm going to go to my insert panel here and I'm going to click on div. And the 4 divs that I need to add, or 4 classes that I need to add, is box 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to say box 1. If you note that I do not need to add a dot at the moment, the reason I do not need to add a dot is because this class here will add the dot for me. So in Dreamweaver, if I'm using the insert panel, I do not need to add a dot. So I'm going to say OK. And here's where it gets a bit tricky. So I need you to come up here and click on the split screen. And down here you can see our div. Now what happens a lot of times is if I click here and I select div, that div is going to go inside of a div. And I don't want that. I want 4 separate divs. So it gets a little bit hard in Dreamweaver at times. This is why it's great to know code. If I click over here, you can see I can't really get to the end of it. I'm still over here. It just gets very difficult. So what's most easy is if I come over here to my div and I go ahead and click enter. Now I know for sure that I'm on a new line and the next divs will be placed correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and click on div and then I'm going to say box 2 and go ahead and do this for the next 2 boxes. Okay, you should have now your 4 boxes. I'm going to take out this break. I do not need a break, so if you do have one of those, please correct that as well. I'm going to come to my CSS Designer now. And I'm going to go ahead and add a page. I'm going to define in the page so we can see that the CSS is actually going to be inside this page. And now I need to add these 4 classes that we just created. I need to add them to the selector so that I can add properties to it. So I'm going to click on selector and I'm going to hit add. And I'm going to say dot this time. I need the dot in order for it to understand that we're looking for the class. And you can see that as soon as I do the dot, it brings up the 4 selectors. So I'm going to say box 1. And I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to hit add again and add the next 4 boxes. So please do that. I now have my 4 classes defined right here in my selectors. I added this one mistake just to show you 2 tips here. If let's say you said box and you forgot the 1, all you gotta do is double click inside of there and I can change the name and hit enter again, and there we go. Let's say I just have too many and I need to delete one. Make sure it's selected and come up here to your selector, and if you hover over here it says remove selector and just click that, and that is how you delete one. So we're looking at width on our layout here. It's under layout. It's on this tab right here. And it's our very first one. So box 1, we're just going to go ahead and set to auto, which is going to be our default. Box 2, we are going to be looking at 2 terms for the next couple here. We're going to be looking at absolute. Our absolute terms are going to include pixels, inches, points, centimeters, and so on. And our relative terms are going to regarding percentages, m's, or x's. So right here, box 2 is actually going to be an absolute term, and we're going to come up here and we're going to say px, and we're going to say 200. And we can see over here that it moves down to 200. So what this pixel means is that it is going to be 200 pixels regardless of your screen size, regardless if it's on a phone, regardless if it's on a huge monitor screen. It's going to be 200 pixels. So if that's something you're looking for your layout for, something to stay that size regardless, this is something that you want to use. You want to use pixels for your width. If you don't, then you want to use the next couple that I'm going to show you in box 3 and box 4. So box 3, we're going to be setting at 50%. So I'm going to come down to percentage, and I'm going to say 50. Now right now you can see it looks about 50% of our screen. So the nice thing about percentages is that regardless of the screen size, it's going to go down to 50%. However, this can be problematic at times. So when you're changing the width of the page layout dramatically, let's say if you have a really, really small screen, it's going to go to 50% of that really, really, really small screen. So in order to get away from maybe it too small or too big, what you can do is you can add a minimum width here and a maximum width. Okay, so at 175, I'm just picking random numbers here, but pixels here at 175, let's say that is as small as I want it to go, because after that you can't read the contents anyways. And my maximum, let's say pixels, I want 500. That's as big as I want it to go. Now it will adjust those screen size until it hits those minimum and maximum widths, and then it will stop. Okay, so that's something that you want to do. If you're using a percentage, make sure that you have a minimum and maximum width so that you can avoid some ugly looking, some ugly looking screens. Your next relatives that we're going to look at is box 4, and we're going to use the EMs. So M's down here, and we're going to put 10. So M's and X's are kind of a hybrid cross between fixed and relative. The M is a measurement that might be familiar to you if you are in print design. It is based on the size of the typeface and font being used. In other words, if you use a large font and the M gets bigger, if you use a small font, the M gets smaller. It ever changes based on whether the font is condensed or expanded face. This type of measurement is typically used to build text-based components like, heads up, navigation menus, when you want the structure to adapt to users' actions that may increase or decrease the font on the site. So if you're doing something fancy with your fonts, if it's getting bigger or any of that type of stuff, you might want to use M's for your navigation, so for your width. So that gives you briefly a idea of how to use the width. Note also that if you're using different font sizes, some of these rules can kind of change a bit. So do some more research on the width property for these items. Okay, go ahead and save this, and we're going to save this as, save it there, and then we're going to do another save as, and we're going to save it as height. And go ahead and watch the second video. Thank you.